we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is so good to be with you all today. We are joining you on June 30th of 2024. And if you don't know the significance of June 30th for this platform, low camera for the camera. 1 second. Low battery. All right, let's try that again now. If you don't know the importance of June 30th for this platform, this means that we are officially on the 30th day of streaming. Which means every single day for the past 30 days, we have done one live episode, no days missed, no days failed. Even days where there were technical issues, there was still an upload that leads to the live version on another platform. So I am extremely excited about that. The fact that we managed to push through it. Many nights of staying up until 2 a.m, 12 at night. Shelly has endured many nights of going to sleep by herself on the days where I had to do a show alone from a last minute call out, or that it was just scheduled to be a late night show on the regular. So a major thanks to the wife for being able to endure all of that. So on today's episode, this is a fully round, what do they call that thing? Where you start at one place and you finish at the other place at the same place. A full
circle.
A full circle on how we started this, because the first episode that we had for the live stream challenge was actually from dating apps to marriage. We got married. It was the first part of this series, and now we're on part 3. We've taken a break from it in the previous weeks just because things have been crazy the past couple weeks. But now we decided, you know what? We need to make sure this third part gets out, because this is the part where we both see a lot of things come out just from the butterfly phase, to now we're actually coming into some struggles. We actually are having to navigate them together, grow in it together, and really and truly decide how we want to move forward in our relationship together. So I think that this episode is going to be chock full of value and wisdom that a single person can benefit from as they contemplate their future dating status. A new dating or even a dating couple certainly will get tons of value from this. And a newly married, or perhaps a couple that have been together for some time who needs a little bit of some ideas to figure out what can be done to kind of reconnect and reestablish that connection, will be able to use. So without further ado, honey, you ready to get into this?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. So to start, we have, as soon as we came off, May 31st became our official date. And on May 31st, this was something that was pretty unique. We had started on it, and it just kind of began from a night where we were hanging out in her porch. That was intentional, where we could have witnesses around, and I went in for the kiss. She accepted, and bada bam, that means that we were in a relationship. And of course, Shelly, always feel free to interject your part at any point that you have something to say something at. And then when we continue on, so now that we're in a relationship, something that continued to be a challenge for us now. And this was from the point of our maybe what, second date, third date, to maybe something like a year after we got together. And that was not a year,
Less than a year,
less than a year.
like
Okay.
a few months.
Yeah. So, uh, and that was the relationships that we each had with our exes. So, as we navigated how these friendships continued, one of the main things we discussed in the previous episode, Shally's ex coming to visit her, and there being a case of him staying over at the apartment, and my reaction to that, and then the full culmination of what ended up happening. So if you didn't see that, make sure you go to part two, because we kind of cover that in depth there and the resolution of how that played out. But there was still a matter on my side where, for me and my ex, we were actually in a Bible study together, and this was something that was cool for me because this was us having some type of through line that was connected through the branch of Jesus. Without that branch, we would have had no reason to continue facilitating a conversation elsewise. So, on Shally's part, Shally, I'll let you explain what some of your thoughts were navigating that, as I continue to have that Bible study environment and some of the issues that came up in relation to you and your ex.
Yeah, so it was a challenging situation to navigate because from my end, in my experience, like I was successfully able to have a friendship relationship with my ex, and to the point that we were friends more time than we were actually together. So I knew that being friends with your ex was something that could happen, but in regards of my case, and that's something that I spoke with my ex as well. We know that the type of friendship that we had as singles was gonna change once we were both, in a relationship. So when he initially told me that he was still in contact with his ex before we even started dating, for me that was okay. So am I. Like I'm also in a friendship relationship with my ex. What I was not expecting is just that my dynamic with my ex changed. So I was also expecting that his dynamic with his ex also changed, but that was not the case. And the narrative were very similar because my ex, he was also like a non-believer. So I was the only contact that he had in regards of Jesus. So for me, it was like very important for to have that type of relationship because I feel like I was the only contact that he had for to know Jesus through me. But that was the same thing that Devante was pretty much experiencing with his ex. That he was facilitating her relationship with Jesus through these Bible studies. So when he started pretty much making his suggestions, like we have to have some boundaries, and pretty much saying that it would be better if I didn't have like significant contact with my ex, which that was the plan to begin with. It wasn't like I was or texting him or calling him. I was just being respectful. I expected the same thing, from his end. But when he said, "Oh no, I'm still meeting weekly in this Bible study with my ex," I was like, "Wait, what? Like, what do you mean you're still, meeting?" Because our situation was different. Like, I broke up with my boyfriend. I don't know, 7 8 years, and he just recently broke up with her. Like, what was it, like a year, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, about a year and a half, almost exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember how I felt within that first year of breaking up a long-term relationship. So I knew that definitely there was still some unresolved, situation. So yeah, so it was challenging because just starting the relationship in that way, there was like a lot of trust that needed to be involved, but also expectations. Like, okay, if you're asking me to do this, I expect you to do the same thing. Like if you're asking me to cut, this connection, this communication, I expect you to do the same thing. So I think that was like the most challenging thing there.
Yeah, and what Shelly says is true. The As far as each of our exes knowing us as the connection point and kind of the driving factor of what would make them want to lean into any type of faith. So that was similar in a way where the similarities began to white have a gap in them was the relationship that was being cultivated through us with the actual faith itself. So in the case of Shadley's ex, her ex was someone who experienced Jesus through basically her and her family. And so they knew of the light that they all provided to his life, as far as goodness, acceptance, loving, and they were a second family to him. The nature of my contact with my ex was in meeting in an online platform with a few other men involved as well, facilitating conversations, going through the gospel, and my ex going and having a list of questions from the readings, and then us all discussing it as a 3 or 4 person group to facilitate her learning. So, as I said, if I had no type of study in that way, I wouldn't have had any contact. And I can understand how, hey, what do you mean you're meeting on a weekly basis, but you expect me not to have any contact? So that is something that I look at and I say, okay, well, if you guys were meeting in some way discussing the Bible with other figures around, then sure, that is a different type of scenario. But that was not the case. And as such, that was something that we had going. Now, something that did end up happening actually was that Shally at a certain point was willing to actually join into the study. And as that came to be, that's actually about the time that that study came to an end. So that was actually something interesting that happened there. But once that happened, the contact became, yeah, pretty much cut in there. There was an instance, and I don't know if Shally would bring it up or not. Totally up to you. But besides that, that pretty much was the end of my portion of engagement. There was there were always some little bits like, oh, reaching out for birthday, reaching out for holidays, because when on my end, once we did have that separation, I didn't send anything for holidays, birthdays, nothing. And I did see an extension during holidays, and that was something that we talked about and has also not been a continuing practice as well. So now we're both completely cut contact. And yeah, anything you want to add to that, Shelly?
Yeah, because the challenge part is that these two people that we were in a relationship, we were also for more than 5 years, right? We're like
Oh yeah,
7 years for you.
it was 5 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, it was a little bit more than 5 years. We care. We care about these people, and especially knowing that they don't have a relationship with Jesus is hard because we definitely want them to get to know the Lord, to get to experience what we are experiencing. Like we want them to also have in the future successful relationships. And I know that Devante, being like a very recent like born again Christian around that time, like he was on fire for the Lord and he was having this amazing experience that obviously he want her to also experience. And I felt that as well with my ex when I was in that period. It took me a conversation with a very wise older woman when I did a trip like in California, that she told me, your ex doesn't have to pretty much get to know the Lord through you. Like that's not your responsibility. Like you don't have to put that on your shoulders. And I was like, that is right. Like that's my desire, but it's not on me. So I think like that's one of the biggest pearls, that even though we had good intentions, like we were trying to pretty much, doing it for the Lord, and it was not on us. Like it was not our responsibility. Like we did what we could while we were, in those relationships. But now, no, we can just pray and hope that they're gonna be able to encounter God in through their journey. So I think that that's one of the things that we just have to realize, because in our case, now that we have a relationship, the way I made that my decision was like, what's more important for me right now. For me, what's more important is my relationship with Devante. So if for him, it means I have to cut, all ties, and I'll do that because I want to be respectful and just trying to pretty much focus my energy, in our relationship, instead of trying to just bring all the old things into it that at the end was not benefiting any of us.
Hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, I don't think I have too much more to say on this. So if you're ready for the next point, we can, unless you have another point you'd like to say on it. So the next phase that came up was so the first set of kind of engagement with Shally's people in her community. So the summertime was a very exciting time for us. Summertime introduced, that Will Smith songs, summer, summer, summertime, summertime. Okay. Coming back to 2024 now. That was, or I guess at the time it was 2022, huh? Summertime was cool because Shally's birthday is about mid-June. And in that time, that was my first time ever meeting like her group of friends. And it wasn't just like meeting one or two, it was a table
All
full,
of them.
probably like what, 10 people, 12 people,
Yeah,
something
like
like that.
the most important people for me here in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I met all of Shally's girls. I met one or two of her work friends. And so that was something that was a lot of new people to meet and a lot of new Christians who I didn't know what their belief set was, what their judgment standard were. And it was a lot at the moment. But of course, you know what I'm saying? Me being who I am, I always meet every challenge with a smile on my face. So I had no fear in my heart. I met them all at dinner. We talked, we laughed. There were some jokes told, some at my expense, some to Shally's expense. And it was just a good time. And we enjoyed it. And then there was another event that happened. There was a summertime event happening at our church that we
Oh,
both went to.
but before you jump into that,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah. So when we were planning to have this dinner with my brother, it was actually pretty intimidating from my end, because I met Devante through a dating app, and that was what, in April. I think it was
Yeah.
like at the end
April. We may have
March. I think it was
connected
March.
during March and
Yeah,
first said hi. And then April, we were really working on like
like in
texting.
person, and
Yeah. Cause I think on you have a timeline. Shally has a timeline of like events that happened. And I
I
think
think it was at
April
the end.
23rd is when we made our first no, that was our first date.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was March. Yeah. Like late March, our first messages.
Yeah. So keep in mind that before March, I didn't know of Devante's existence. And so, like, the same way, all of my friends. So it was like, and these are friends that are always there for me, but I might not be as communicative. So it was like, he's my boyfriend. It's like, what do you mean you have a boyfriend? So yeah, so I think that most of them already knew it, because I especially with my girls, I was very open with them about this like dating journey. Again, in my case, I didn't date like for years, long years, like more 5, 6, 7
Hmm.
years. So when I started dating, I was very open with my girls. We were just talking about it, so they knew. So yeah, so for me it was like, wow, this person that was not in my life, and then suddenly here he is in this like table with the most important people of my life. Like it was a lot of pressure in that end, because for me, once I started dating, it was like a commitment. It was like pretty much we date to marry. So for me, it was very important for him to get to know all my closest people, but also for them to get to know him.
Mhm.
So
There was one friend in particular that Shally had who was an absolute firecracker. She's like, "You doing my girl right? You know what you out here doing? What's your intention, sir?" And then I'm just over here like, let me tell you.
no, but he did very good first impression. But shout out to my girls always looking out for me.
So we had that. It was a cool event. And then anything else you wanted to say about that night? So that was a cool appearance. The next thing that we had that was kind of a social event that happened was Shally's church was hosting a summertime like festival type of thing. And during this festival, it was just like come hang out, play some games. And so we were serving, setting up the games for the kids to come and play, enjoy it. They had dodgeball going on inside, food and drinks, the whole 9 yards, you know. I met some of Shally's like leaders that would lead the young adult group that Shally was a part of at the time. I met a few of them. I met more of Shally's people that were in her church community. We were playing games around, and it was a cool time all around. Nothing crazy. The environment was nice and lax. And, you know, I do what I do. I came in, I talked my talk, I played some games, I was competitive. I won some, I lost some. It was just a good time. Yeah. So that is like some things that happen in June, and then July comes around, and this is where Shally goes and she travels. She travels to Ecuador. And so this is our first time as boyfriend and girlfriend, her traveling, being away, and us kind of just talking, communicating through text message and whatnot. And a certain event happened in Ecuador. I'll let Shally tell of her goodnesses and challenges that came from the Ecuador trip.
Yeah, so I went to Ecuador for a medical mission trip. It was my first time going to a mission trip as a medical doctor. So that was very exciting. Just, we were able to see so many people there. The only thing is that in my experience, when I was in Ecuador, I actually got sick. And I think it was the second day that we were going to be pretty much providing medical care. And I think I got food poisoning because I was just like vomiting, 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 vomit. I've never vomited so much in my life. And it was because in there, they don't refrigerate the dairy products. And I think the people that was giving us the food, they gave us like some type of smoothie, and I think that dairy, made me sick because I was not the only one that got sick. But I haven't felt like that, in my life. Like I was pretty much in the other side. I just couldn't tolerate anything by mouth, and we had our medications, but they were locked in the other side of the street. So they had to find, the key to try to get me something to stop the nausea. So that was one of the things. And then at the end of the trip, I also got traveler's diarrhea. So I was like, man, this is just the one thing after the other. And then when we were in the airport, one of the other missionaries, he was also sick, but he didn't look too good. He was just so tired appearing. He was just, I think he was like almost like with the runny nose, the cough. And then when I arrived home the next day, I started having the same symptoms. And it turned out that I got COVID. So it was like one thing after the other thing. So I ended up also having COVID for the first time. Keep in mind that I'm a medical doctor that has been taking care of COVID patients since I arrived here in Florida. Like I did 2 full years full in contact with them, and I never got COVID until that time. And I got all my vaccines, I got all of my boosters, and yeah, so I got COVID. And so when I get home, Initially, this guy over here was not gonna pick me up at the airport because he had like other plans. I don't know if you remember that. And I was like, honey, I feel sick. Like, do you think you can pick me up from the airport instead of just me getting an Uber? And I think his friends convinced him, like, go ahead and pick up,
I
your
don't
girlfriend.
remember this set.
Yeah, he was having like I don't know if it was a get with his friends. And I didn't want to bother him because he had his plans and he has already those plans established. And I was like, it's fine. I'm here with my other friend. We'll take an Uber. But at the end, he had a change of heart and he actually picked me up because I was not having a good time. And yeah, so that's how I arrived sick here. And for me, that experience with me being sick really showed me a lot about Devante because from day one of me, I was supposed to, I think, go to my work the next day. And the way my symptoms were with COVID, I was just so tired. So tired. Like I woke up with my alarm and I was just kept falling asleep. I was trying to get ready and I would just fall asleep in my couch until after I had to excuse myself. Like, I don't think I can go to work because I just don't feel well. And that's when I realized I had COVID. And Devante, that didn't scare him. Keep in mind that we were, what, like maybe 2 months in, 2 months in on our relationship. And instead of saying, oh, let me just keep my distance, I don't want to get sick as well. No, he was with me from day one. He exposed himself in order to be able to feed me and provide me, the needs that I were needing. And so yeah, so for me that meant a lot that he was able to take care of me when I felt so miserable and had mucus all over.
We ain't
So
scared of nothing out here.
so yeah, so he didn't get COVID. I think have you ever had COVID or
Oh
not?
yeah, I've had
Yeah.
COVID twice actually.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So his immune system was on top because he did not get COVID, but he
Crazy.
was
It's
taking good care of me. So
I get COVID from situations like going to Christian concerts or the first time I got it was from just like a work environment. But I don't get COVID from like literally kissing my girlfriend on the lips that has COVID. Wild stuff, right? Antibody strong over here, man. Yeah, that was it was just a rough time for Shally at that period, man. She was just crying in so many ways, and her messages, I could just feel her pain and agony in those situations. So I know that a lot of people, coming back from a trip, to come back and to have to be out, it's something that can be so almost like man, was it worth it? You start to question, was it worth all of this pain for the trip? And so if I could do something to alleviate any of that doubt, then I wanted to. And also, being in a new relationship, I was excited to see Shally again, and I wanted to be able to spend that time together. And I also wanted to show, like, hey, whatever your situation is, I am going to prioritize you taking care of your health and making sure that that I'm going to be around, even when it's to my detriment, in order just to make sure that you have someone that you can rely on and depend on. So, yeah, it was an easy decision for me in that time.
yeah, and he definitely gained extra points with my family. Like my parents, they were so impressed. Like, wow, he's taking good care of you. I can't believe that he exposed himself to, take care of you. So my mom was very, very grateful because imagine I wasn't by myself during that rough time. So
Mm. Yeah, man. And I guess that kind of brings us to continuing with our dating process. So at a certain part, we started to continue with dates. We were now spacing out our dates. I was coming over a lot for dinner and we were doing hangouts and things like that. And it was, I probably would spend anywhere for, like, I would come over like 3 days a week in some points and have dinner, come over, hang out for a bit, and then drive back home. And that was the situation for a while. And then as we were doing that, I don't know if you want to get into what that ended up leading to, or if you want to save that for later. The deer in the headlights is hilarious. We can get to it later. So, do you have anything to say about the date, the spacing of the dates, and coming over for dinner and all that?
Yeah, I think that before we were officially dating, we were going out like in a weekly basis. I think that once we started like fully dating, we didn't go on dates as much, but we were still making it intentional to spending time together. That for me, that was super important. So definitely I was trying to show off my cooking skills. So he would come over and I would have like something cooked. So yeah, but I think that we were still trying to balance and do some fun things. I think that one of the things that we did after we started dating was going to the museum, the Illusion
Yes.
Museum.
The Illusion Museum, and we have this picture that Shally, she would do this thing where she would like crop it, but it was a picture where basically the light reflects on you and it casts a shadow. And so we did that and we made a heart shape. And it's something that Shally would send as like a good night text a lot. And it's us, each of us bent over and equaling a heart. And yeah, so we did that. We
Oh, I
would,
forgot about that. I was doing stickers, stickers with our pictures
that's what it is.
for the text messages.
Yeah, the Illusion Museum, going to just like walk around City Walk. Lou Gardens was something that we did, a beautiful botanical garden with all kinds of flowers, incredibly beautiful. Yeah, and then after we would complete these things, maybe some dinners would happen, things like that. But I would always go home at the end of the night for now. And yeah, so that's pretty much all I got to say about that piece right there. At a certain point, we did get into, and remember from the last video, we were into this book called The 101 Questions. So during the process of the summertime, I took this as an opportunity because after a few months, besides like the issues with the exes going on, pretty much I knew with Shally after 2 months that this girl right here is solid and I want to make this something real. And so I thought that between conflict resolutions, both of us having a healthy fear and love of God, and then with this book of questions basically guiding us, I'm like, I want to get through as many of these questions as quick as possible. So we would have some days where we would bang out 4 or 5 questions a day that were like very intentional, high impact, high meaning questions. And for the most part, we would be able to just get four and just kind of answer them outright. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? If there was any type of misunderstanding or disagreement, anything like that, we would talk about it and we would end up at a place that we're good. Some of the questions were more deep and they required more of an understanding of each other more thoroughly. And so we would have to kind of skip certain ones and proceed, and then we would come back to it in order to really figure out what exactly our true thoughts were about a certain question. Do you have any thoughts about the 101 questions?
Yeah, I thought that in our process of dating, we were always so intentional that we wanted to date to marry. So I highly recommend doing something similar like that because it truly touched on all topics that you can imagine. So it puts scenarios that it would have not otherwise happened, or we wouldn't have discussed unless it would have happened. So I think it was a good idea just to go back, things in our childhood, in our future, like what do you think finances, like all of these topics that maybe are not spoken in those first months of relationship, but in our case, this is the next question, so we need to talk about it, so let's discuss it, that like this is important. So it's a very good way to know if you're compatible or not, because that's what we were trying to figure out, like are we compatible, like if we marry, like are we going to work out, like because that we know the divorce rate are so high. So it truly is important for you to get to know your partner in a very deep level before making a commitment that is pretty much for the rest of your life. So I think that doing the question was really good. He kept saying like, once we finish the last question, that's when I'm gonna propose. So he was just trying to do 5, 10, 12 questions if he could. So yeah, so I think that the question is a really good idea.
Yeah, and as much as I was like totally serious about proposing once we finished, trying to get 4 or 5 questions a day, there were definitely days where we would only do 1 or 2 questions, 3 questions. There were some days where we would just miss out, and there were some weeks where for like a whole week we would not do any questions. Then we're like, oh man, we got to kind of play catch up, because if you were to do 5 questions a day, you would be finished after like less than a month. However, I think God knew us well enough to know that, hey, I'm going to allow some things to come up where you're too busy. Like there's some things that you got to think about on your own. And so we didn't actually end up finishing the questions until maybe 6 months later, huh? And I think to the benefit in a lot of ways, because that was still where we were in some disagreement as far as what was going on with the exes, and kind of figuring out like proper boundaries, the discussion of it. So kudos to God for that one. And for me, I looked at introducing this book of 101 questions as a way for me to lead the relationship, because what I didn't want to do was Shally she was 28 at the time and I was 26, I think 27. No, you had just turned 29.
Yeah, so I was 28 when we started dating, and you were 27.
Yes.
And then I turned 29.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to waste any of Shally's time if we weren't a match. And I didn't want to waste any of my time if we weren't the match, because uh, just because of that simple fact that women do have a certain age range to be able to have kids and all that. And it takes time, the dating process, making sure that you're all good. So I was very on top of it. And this was a book that I'd found from a podcast. So I 100% recommend this book to any couple. All the couples that we knew of that were in the dating phase, I recommended it to each of them. I had all the questions copied and pasted from Google, and I would literally just send the document that had these things through a text message. And it was as simple as that. We never even bought the book. We just
I did.
You bought the book?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you did.
I ended up buying the book because sometimes we might have seen the question in different perspective, and the book itself has a pretty much guidance on how to answer the question and what's the intentionality behind that question. And it's also a Christian book, so sometimes it even had like Bible verses to support, the question and where it's what's gonna head us. So yeah, I ended up
That's
buying
right.
It was like the Kindle version in my iPad.
100%, which is crazy. We used it for free for months, and then Shally goes out and buys it.
Yeah, it was worth it.
So that was something that was just, like I said, it was a through line for like 6 months and whatnot. But then another thing that we did that was very intentional was we prayed every night together. So was it from the time of us starting texting, or was it from the time of us being in a relationship? Or maybe it was from the time that we even started talking on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think that it was before we were official. I think we were already praying every night together.
Yeah. And that was something that I found to be a priority once again, in that, I've listened to a lot of podcasts about it. I was watching videos on YouTube about it. And I was just looking at what are good Christian practices. And a through line was make sure you pray every night together. And so when I got with Shally and I did make that decision on our second date that I want this to be my girl, I introduced it very early. Hey, I want to get on with you. I want to make sure to pray. And at first it was kind of just like I want to build up a streak kind of thing. And then it very quickly became this is like a thing that we do together. And to this day, us being together a little over 2 years now in total, we have maybe missed less than a handful. If it was just stuff where I was just out really late, or she just didn't have availability on her phone, we've missed less than a handful of nights where we've prayed together. And so, I'm very happy about that because that's just a thing of intentionality. And there have certainly been nights where I've been at the movies with friends really late, and I literally step outside of the movie theater, say, "Hey, I'm at the movies right now. Hey, I just want to pray before we go to sleep." We do it real quick, and then she's off. There's been times where, she might be out with her girls. She'll call me. She's with her. Every scenario, we make it a point to step away and to call each other, make sure that we get a prayer in. So yeah. Any thoughts you have on that?
No, no, I thought that was a very good habit, just to wait for us to refocus again our relationship in God. So
Yeah. So the next piece of our relationship that comes up was the challenges that we faced. And these were numerable because there were personality challenges. There were certainly huge amounts of cultural differences. And Shally is a doctor. And with that comes a very specific type of personality that you have to be able to thrive in that. So we can go ahead and start to jump into that a bit. Would you like for me to lay it out, or would you
yeah,
like to?
go ahead.
Awesome. So Shally at the time was still a resident working in her third year. And I was at the time an electrician. And so we would have days where I would come over and then she would be there. And Shally's body is to where if she does not eat every 2 to 3 hours, her blood sugar will drop. And especially after work, the combination of being tired from work and then being hungry, she would be irritable sometimes. And so there would be times that I would come over and she would just be in a mood. And I eventually had to learn that, hey, when she gets home, like, just pretty much don't even like say too much. Let her get some food in her mouth and let her get good. But on my end, as someone who also was coming from doing electrical work, dirty stuff, you're getting cuts, you might be getting electrocuted depending if you're being dumb or not. But I sometimes would have the feeling that, man, how is it that I'm coming over here to be with you and you have this just like mood of irritability? And so that was something that was a bit of contention for me. But then the thing that was bigger than that also was being a doctor. Shally has, as a resident, she's being trained to lead a team, to be able to make calls, to be able to just take the head of a position where she has a team underneath her, and that means being in that leadership position. Well, when you are the type of person that you're in a leadership position, there are certain traits that are either immutable or it is very difficult to parse out that trait while you're in that role versus you when you're out of that role. And so there are certain traits such as for example, giving commands is something that I don't respond to, that is a required thing in her position. There are certain things like the way that you speak to someone and how you approach a bringing up a topic or bringing up something that needs doing. And so that for us was also a source of tension for us. You have some things you like to say, Shelley?
Mm, yeah, I think pretty much that it, from your perspective, because yeah, I even going earlier, in my family dynamic, as you mentioned, even the cultural differences. Like, I live with my family my whole life, even while I was in this medical school. And my family just relied so much on me. Like, there was a lot of like emotional instability with them. So I always felt like I had to have like this leadership position and make these calls and just like hold the fort together. And then starting in my career, pretty much the same team. The medical doctor is the one that is responsible for pretty much their patients, the nurses, and I have always to make the calls, to give orders. Is pretty much what I do. So going to this relationship and trying to, like, how do I say it, like remove some of that mindset, because like, even though I've been like independent, my in the last 2 years while I was living here in Florida by myself, like now I have this like person that now we are in this relationship, like in this partnership. So I don't feel like I have to be the one in charge all the time. Like I have to leave some, pretty much leave that responsibility also onto him. So just like navigating the that personality that I have to pretty much lean on for so long, like in my family, in my career, to now, okay, now I have somebody that wants me to share pretty much this responsibility, wants to even take the role to lead. And in my case, it was just like a change in mindset, but coming up from what the Bible says in Christianity, like my intention was always to be in a relationship where the man is the leader. Like I had no intention of this like 50-50 thing, like, oh, I lead 50% of the time, you lead 50%. No, it's like my expectation is for you to lead me 100% of the time. So it was like finding that balance. Okay, so what does that, oh, how do you say, like, what does that look like
Yeah.
in regards of, me letting him lead me, and just like relying on him.
Hmm.
And there were a lot of things. I'm sorry, I know we're gonna say something. And there were a lot of things that were even like subconscious. It's just part of my personality that I didn't mean anything bad with it, but he would receive it in a very like harsh way. So it was just trying to learn each other's languages and trying to have some grace as well. And that's something that we're still trying to figure it out. We are trying to continue to learn each other and trying to learn the best way to communicate and to allow each other to fulfill our roles even right now in our marriage.
Yeah, and it's as she said, it's something that we still are we work at, and we have to have conversations where it's like, honey, I know that this is your thing, but this is something that to me is making it difficult for me to be a leader of you. Being a leader means, there's good parts to being led by somebody, but there are also parts that are either don't feel good, they're uncomfortable, they mean that, sometimes things don't look a certain way that you like, or even that I like. I would like to go an easy route, but I have to go a certain route where there's just more resistance involved to it, because that's what I'm called to do, is to lead. And I talk about this on other shows where it comes to leading, students or life groups, that if you're just leading someone and the way that you lead is just like making them feel comfortable all the time, but you're not calling them to be better in certain parts, or that person is not trusting you in submission, as an authority person that they are with, then that is not a person that you truly trust to lead. That's not a person that you're truly submitted to. And if you're not submitted to someone that is supposed to be your leader or your authority figure, then it's pretty much a something that happens as convenience. And so that is something, and it is tough to do it, because when you come from Shally's background and having to have sort of Shally was always the kind of the standout person among all kinds of communities, whether it was within her family, whether it was in schools, in college. Shally led something where re- speak to that really quick, Sally. You started something and then it ended up growing into a
Like,
whole.
yeah, in my medical school, I restarted because after one of the hurricanes, one of our family medicine interest group, it didn't kept going. So I was the one that decided to reopen it the next year, and it was very intimidating. I've never had like a leadership position in that magnitude, but I, opened it as the president of the family medicine interest group in my medical school, and then I had to put together, the group of people that would, help me in navigating the different activities, and I will coordinate the activities. And it was, yeah, like a lot of work. But then at the end, even like right now that I finished my medical school in 2020, that interest group is still going, so
Mhm.
it's very rewarding to see, a step of courage that I took is still, bringing fruit. So
Yeah, and so that's something that like Shally can say she did that, and also when Shally graduated her residency, she received awards for being the doctor that cared for her patients the best. She literally got a, what was it, a Care for Patients award.
yeah, the art of medicine, and I think it was the compassion award too.
Look at that, the art of medicine and the compassion award. Who the heck wins that besides my wife? Am I right?
Glory to God. only God
Like
only God can do that.
and so these traits that she has, it was difficult for me because there is, and also for me too, coming from a life where I was a pampered kid in a lot of ways. And so I knew how to lead brothers because with brothers, you just kind of, you're like, hey, stop being stupid. You're being dumb, idiot. Come over here. Maybe smack him upside the head. But obviously, I'm not going to do that with a girlfriend and especially not a wife. So I had to figure out this different skill set that I didn't have. And when it comes to leading a woman, this wasn't something that growing up for, even with my long term relationship, I did not look at that relationship as I led it. It wasn't until I became a Christian that the idea of leading a relationship as a man was even introduced to me. And so, I would, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm watching different things, I'm looking up like, I'm looking up what it looks like to lead a relationship biblically. And there were a lot of cases and scenarios where my version of leadership was incorrect. And I would have to humble myself in a lot of ways. I would have to see the pain in Shally's eyes that I was causing. There were a lot of conversations that involved tears and quivering lips and her being afraid of what my expression of leadership would look like in the future based off of the way that I was portraying myself to her. And in those moments I didn't necessarily have the tools to understand why what I was doing was what I was doing. I didn't necessarily understand that there were maybe some parts that were not necessarily correct. Um, and I was still doing a lot of parsing out of what from what I was learning in the secular world about being a leader versus what was being taught in church about leadership. What is the good intermingling of that can have you leading as a competent man who is not the butt of the joke so much, that is taken seriously, but also has that compassion and that heart to listen and to be able to make these changes. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, still having this ability to call out and to basically call up to a certain standard the ways in which the relationship would be navigated. And so it was certainly an evolution process as far as our personalities, us in these positions that were so unnatural to us, I think, between our upbringings and then just our exposure. Because I mentioned how I didn't consider myself leading the relationship that I was in, but also Shally's relationship. She was very much trying to pull into the Christian lifestyle, her ex as well. And so she wasn't in a relationship where she was necessarily being led, she was doing the leading. And in my previous relationship, I was very much in a 50-50 relationships. And in some cases, it was even my ex giving more in it than I was giving at the time. So it was a very challenging dynamic, but it's something that with a lot of communication, a lot of talks, um, and therapy and counseling that we have become more equipped and have gotten more tools. You have any thoughts you want to contribute to that, Charlie?
Yeah, because we definitely had our ups and downs, especially with our even like our language barrier. Like my first language is Spanish, his first
Mm-hmm.
language is English. So in my mind, there's a way for Hispanic people to talk that is very different to
Mm-hmm.
what he would expect as the best way to bring a message across. Like Hispanic, we're loud and we talk rough, roughly. Like how you would say,
Sure.
we talk rough. Our filters are very different to maybe the filters that he had growing up or his expectation. And for me, it was like there's nothing wrong with the way I'm saying things. Like in my mind, it's just this is how I would say it to my mother in some way. Like I'm just trying to transmit the message in the best way that I can, being that English is not my first language. So maybe in my head it sounds one way, but you're receiving it completely different. So we have had to navigate that, like the language barrier, the just like the different situation because it was rough. I'm a very emotional person, so I cry very easily. That's why he said, there has been a lot of tears, but something that I appreciate about Devante is just communication. Communication is always key. We had our rough days where we always, allow ourselves to cool down. There was even one time that we even put some rules, rules when we have like different, or we have conflict. It was like, I don't know if you remember all the, I think I still have it there. Like
Yeah.
it was like, we were gonna like talk it through like without distraction. We were not gonna yell. Something that Devante grew a lot is that I think there was some time that he would even just like walk out of a discussion or storm out. And that was something that in my case was triggering because growing up somebody close to me even would react in some ways like that. So yeah, so we wrote rules like we are not gonna walk out of discussion if somebody said that they need a pause or a break just to gather their emotions. Like we're gonna allow that, and we had like different things like written down, and I think that helped to have like some type of structure. I wouldn't say that we always were able to how do you say like
Just follow the rules.
yeah, like follow through with it, but at least that was our goal. And you need to have goals. You need to know what you're working towards to be able to know, what are the things that still needs improvement. So I think that yeah, a lot of like challenging situation, but as Devante said, I was doing therapy with a behavioral expert before meeting Devante. He joined me in some of my sessions. I had to fire one of my previous therapists after.
Man.
When you do therapy, please get yourself a good therapist because I was having like a very difficult conflict with Devante. I can't even remember what exactly it was. So since that was the source of my anxiety, my therapist was like, yeah, just tell him to come to the next session. But I felt like he was not fair to Devante. Like he asked like an open-ended question and Devante answered. And then he started to pretty much say things that he didn't say. And then he was like, oh, that's all you have to say. And almost like, say, okay, bye. And then he was like, oh, did you see that? Like he was not willing to do the work. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, it was a very bad therapy song.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that, man, when it comes, as speaking to the lady audience, goodness gracious, if you have a therapist or a couples counsel, whatever, make sure that doggone this person is not a one-sided biased person, because that's a big issue that I see in the therapy space is that you have therapists that come in and they bring their own opinions and their own biases in instead of looking at what are some ways to improve this union and how can I actually come. The person had no understanding of my character, had no understanding of who I was, like how I operated. He just heard certain things, and because of what he heard, he formed an opinion, and then he had a small interaction and said, oh yep, I pegged this guy right here. So definitely do your due diligence. Don't think that your first therapist is going to be a good therapist. And even if you are with a therapist, be willing to switch out if that person starts to become disconnected And sometimes complacency can set in where it's just like a tell me about your day, tell me about your week. How did that make you feel? Oh my goodness. If they are just like a superficial therapist, I call that superficial therapy, where it's just like, tell me about that. Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah. And I sometimes I would hear Shally's sessions and like some of it was just so non-insightful. And I'm just like, she's wasting her time in there with this. And I came to find out that she had been feeling like, that I don't really know that this is really doing anything for me. Like I'm getting to express things, but he's not really providing anything insightful or anything for me to work on going forward. Which is like one of the biggest things in therapy. It's actually why I stopped my own therapy is because I would find that a lot of the time it was just the person listening and not providing any tools moving forward. Um, so yeah, watch out for your therapist, folks.
Yeah, but after that, I was able to get another therapist that she was good. And even before we got married, we have been doing like some sessions like every 3 weeks. And I highly, highly encourage it. Like you don't have to wait until you have a conflict to do, couple sessions. So I would
Mhm.
highly recommend that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like the idea is to support that. You don't wait until you are 300 pounds to go to the gym. You go to the gym no matter what size you are. You don't wait until you are a person is bleeding out before you get your license. You get your license as soon as you can, and then you maintain that license, you renew it as it is needed every single year. And I could keep going on, but the point is that you do something as part of a optimal maintenance routine and not as an optional, when it's at its worst routine. I think a lot of people make that mistake, and then the results bear out as they are right now, where people do seek counseling, but typically it's only the counseling as a couple that is right before divorce. It's that mandated counseling. So if you have anything else to say, feel free. If not, I'll go to the next topic of it.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that we use to conflict resolution, I found this app called Pair. I think that gave us a lot of tools because that app, the way it works, it gives always like a daily question for you to answer and get to know more things about your partner. And but what I like is that it also had different categories, and one of the categories was conflict resolution. So that also helped, just the way it works is that Devante answers the question independently. I answered the question independently in our phone, and then both answers are revealed at the same time once both persons have answered the question, and
Which
then we
is
just discuss
great
it.
because that means that one person's answers don't influence another person's answers.
Yeah, so I think that allowed also to navigate certain topics because that app, they do a lot of like evidence based psychology, literature. So yeah, so I also highly recommend that app as well.
Yeah. So if you guys are keeping count, the number of tools that we had couples counseling that we were doing together. Granted, this was like towards the fourth quarter of it. We didn't start with couples
Yeah.
counseling. This was in like October and later, maybe November-ish, that I started joining Shally with her counseling. So we had the couples counseling at a certain point. We had the 101 questions. We had the Paired app, which the Paired app came later. And then another thing that we had at the beginning of our relationship, in addition to the 101 questions, was we had the 5 love languages. And we actually have love languages here as a piece that you wanted to talk about with this, Shally. So, what do you want to talk about on that?
Yeah. So when we were going like back and forth with our conflicts, and there's a point where you ask yourself, like, is this the right person for me? Like, am I the right person for this person? And as we discussed in the previous episode, Devante was very intentional in our second date to bring this book about the love language, and our love language is pretty similar. So we were trying to use that in our way to best communicate our love and affection, toward each other. So one of ways that I realized that Devante was pretty much my person, the person that I wanted to be with, was when he said something specific about the love language. And he was like, you know, and that was when we were like pretty much in a makeup session after we
Yeah.
had like a very, very,
It was that one was a big one.
I at this point I can't remember
Yeah,
exactly
I
what it
can't
was,
remember it, but
but
I
it was bad.
remember, yeah.
It was bad. But the next day he was home and we were just like talking it through and
She says home, she means her
oh
home, not
yeah.
our home. We didn't
No,
live
no,
together.
my apartment. And something that I appreciate about Devante is just his wisdom because he does have a lot of wisdom. And we were pretty much trying to understand like what are our triggers. And because, we both like love each other, we both are intentional of going forward with this relationship, but why do we keep having like these stumbling blocks? Like, what are our triggers? And, in my ends, and I remember that he's the one that pretty much pointed it out. Like I get triggered when my identity pretty much get questioned and things that have to do, with my personality. And in his case, he gets triggered when he feels disrespected. If I say something that crosses as disrespectful, then that's when he gets triggered. So we just trying to understand where each of us, are coming from. But then he says, like, what? I think I figured it out that your love language are not any of the love languages of the book. Your love language is actually God. And I was like, yeah, that's definitely my love language. Like when you show love to me by praying over me, praying together, like sharing Bible verses that encourage me and that support me. And something that I was keeping before he said that, I had bought some shirts for us that I was keeping. How do I say, like that I was I don't know how to say it. I was keeping the shirts for a specific time, but I didn't know when was that time. I know that I saw them, I bought them, and then I kept them until I knew when to give them out. And when he said that my love language was God, I that's when I felt in my heart that, okay, that this is the right time to give these shirts, because the shirts, what he said, it just says just God. And when he said that, it was like, wow, now we are in sync. Like, well, now we are in the same page, and it's like some type of like confirmation that this is the person that God wants for me, because this is what I've been praying for. And that's when I gave out the shirts, pretty much confirming what
Mm.
I already had in my heart, and what he's now saying with his mouth, that pretty much aligns what like our thoughts.
Yeah, and that was something that like I really struggled to arrive there because you look at this book of the love languages, and for certain it's accurate in a lot of ways. Most everybody falls underneath at least one, if not two of these majorly that they are comforted by. But for Shally, I think, and I can truly say this, Shally is someone that is such a different person from a lot of women, in that it's so uncommon the amount of genuine love that she has for God and celebrating him and honoring him. And like, for me finally to be able to see, like, I had to look at how her relationship with her parents were. Like, her mother has a habit of these very expressive prayers that are not your cookie cutter 15-20 second prayers. They will pray, and they'll pray for minutes and minutes on end. Shally would pray over her mother would pray over Shally. Shally's father has a habit of texting prayers to pretty much everybody, and like, it's something he never misses on. And then looking at just the ways that Shally has always responded to anything that I brought up involving God, she was always for it if it honored him, glorified it. And then just some of her favorite things to do were praying deeply, putting on just this worship music to listen to. When April comes, she likes to do this Holy Week thing. And so it was just something that I realized, like, holy smokes, the things that impact her the most are things that are related to God. And so I think it's important that for us as men, like when we see these things that we notice about women, and this speaks to the idea of letting a woman be seen and felt and heard. But to be able to see a woman is to be able to recognize these things and then to put it into some type of expression that lets her know, hey, I see this part of you, I acknowledge it, and it's a trait of you that does not go unnoticed. And so I thought that was something really important to communicate to her, to show one, like, I see this about you, but two, I understand going forward what is something that I need to do to be able to operate better with you. Because as great as the five love languages is, um, the most impactful way to reach you is through this other book, and that is the Bible. And yeah, anything else you got on that? Yeah. And actually it's kind of crazy too. Like for a while, I think I've forgotten that I actually said that. And when you reminded me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I did say that a while ago. And like I really hope that like I've just kind of internalized that idea and not truly forgotten. So so the next thing we can talk about this as kind of a set, and that is the therapy sessions and the paired questions. So what are your thoughts on that?
We already covered that.
We did cover that. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Check.
So another couple of things that happened lining up were hurricane season coming up, which we're about to be back in it. Woohoo! So a couple of events that came up were hurricane season and our first Christmas. So obviously with hurricane season, this was something where this was Shally's first hurricane season in Florida. And so Shally being Puerto Rican, they have had recent experiences with hurricanes that have resulted in just utter destruction of the local population. And so Shally had a massive fear and anxiety about the coming hurricane and the repercussions of what that would mean for her home, for her family, her people, but also what that would mean for her living alone by herself in her apartment, what to do safety precautions wise. And so at a certain point, I decided, hey, you know what? Instead of you staying at your place by yourself, you should come over and stay just with me and my family. And for some people hear that and y'all think, stay with you. What do you mean by that? And I mean, yeah, this is something that, you know, she came over and, you know, we shared a space for a certain amount of time. I think it was what, like 3 days to a week, something in that range, right?
I think it was just maybe 2 days.
2 days?
Yeah,
Really?
2 to 3 days. I don't think it was that much.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was something that we did, but it was interesting, like seeing her responses. And there were certainly moments. There was a specific moment that stood out where, because of the anxiety of it all, Shally had just this urgency, and in this urgency, we fell into some conflict because I was attempting to lead the situation, and Shally's anxiety caused her to kind of just like be a little bit, I think, more emotional, to be just a little bit more like quick to some developments. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so my anxiety comes from, my experience in Puerto Rico. We have hurricane season as here in Florida, but it wasn't, I think it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken, where we had a very bad hurricane. I think it was like borderline five, category 5 hurricane. And that hurricane was pretty much devastated the whole island. And like growing up with hurricanes, like we understand hurricanes, like we know when they're coming and we prepare. And that's what I've been taught that whenever there's a hurricane, you prepare. And then there's the people that are always hopeful that, oh, nothing's gonna happen, just gonna be like just rain. And when in that 2018 hurricane, there were a lot of people that say the same thing, like there's nothing big is gonna happen. It's just gonna be like other hurricane, just a little bit of rain, some flooding, and that's it. But this hurricane pretty much devastated the island. Like I still remember, when the hurricane came, we knew it was going to be big. The pressure of the hurricane was so strong that was pulling the door of my house, and water just started going inside of the house, and we have to put things to hold the water. And it was like a pretty like massive event. For the next day, there was just no power anywhere, and there were just zero communication. Like none of the cell phone lines were working. The only thing that would work was the telephone. How do you say the ones that are connected to the ground?
Um,
Line,
telephone
line,
line?
line, phone, line.
Phone lines?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
So that would be the only thing working in radio stations. And then my mom, being a radio reporter, she wasn't even with us. She was working at her job, and not knowing what's going on. So yeah, so that was pretty. I don't know how to say, like, traumatizing.
Hmm.
So I think it's fair to say that all Puerto Ricans that experience that hurricane have PTSD, because we pretty much fear for our life. People had to run from their houses, and it was just pretty bad. So that's like the worst case scenario I have in my head, because for a full week we had no communication whatsoever. So,
Hmm.
and we couldn't go to stores because you couldn't drive. There was just trees all over. So the food that you had was the food that you stored. And in my case, I didn't have power in my house for more than 40 days. So it was pretty massive. So when this hurricane comes into Florida, I'm like, I have to prepare, because that's what I've been taught. I have to make sure I have my flashlight, have my batteries, we have our canned food, and we have water. But he was like, you need to worry about that. It's not gonna be like big deal. Like, I know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, and every time that he said something, I was like, okay, but what are your facts? Like, why, where are you coming with this? Like, this is why we need to prepare. And again, I did have anxiety because I'm a little bit traumatized by that experience. So I think that there was a lot of like conflict in that situation, because I'm trying to help him understand that we need to prepare more than what we're doing. And he was just not giving me that support that I needed. And he was not giving me any reassurance whatsoever. So it was like he wanted to lead me, but I don't think that he was realizing that I needed to lead myself in this other way as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and the day of the hurricane, there was a particular conflict. I forget what it was completely. I don't remember dialogue, anything like that, but it was an issue of like the timing of things and like something about the respect piece in there. And that was something that we had to work through, but ultimately we did manage to spend that time together to get through the hurricane. She came back, her apartment was not devastated, but there was damage to it. We worked together to fix it up, and yeah, we continued on from there.
I mean, I did lose my apartment. Like, they say that I couldn't continue to be there because it got flooded. And even though I didn't lose most of my things, since in here the walls are made of paper, I guess, and the water just like went up the wall, so they needed to redo everything. So they pretty much said you can be here by the end of Friday. So that was like another different thing. Like, I became homeless so quickly. But again, Devante was there to support me. Like, we went to the apartment, we had to clean all that water out. We pretty much cleaned everything out. And, even in that moving process, when I was able to get my another apartment, he was pretty much leading, because I think I had to go to work or do something. And he was
Hmm.
pretty much in charge and helping lead all the wonderful people from my church that came also to help me. So through all adversity, something that I appreciate, that Devante was always there. He was always present, and he was always, giving that extra mile. So
And around a similar time frame, I think this was maybe a little bit afterwards, but after hurricane season, there came an event that I thought was going to be truly the end of our relationship, and that was me losing my job in the electrical field. This was my third electrical job in that calendar year. And this was the first one that I had been fired from. It was the first one I'd been fired from, but it was the third one that I had been to. And so I was just at a place of massive uncertainty about how I'm going to handle my bills as far as my car, my phone, just traveling for church and food and rent that I was paying to my mom that I was living with at the time. And so I thought for sure, the expression goes, no money, no honey.
Mhm.
Old schoolers know that one. You ain't got no money, you can't get no honey. And so as I prepared to tell Shally about this, I was pretty much already of the mind frame of like, okay, I'm gonna tell her this. She's gonna be like, okay, well, I don't know what to do with you, that like this stuff sucks. Good luck. I'll be praying for you. Goodbye. I was fully prepared for that. And somehow this girl decided, like, okay, well, yeah, I'm sure that things will be okay. Continue to work on it. I'm sure that God will provide a way. We pray about this together, and I'm here to support you, here to help you out. And we continued, and that led us through the November season. And luckily I did have some family in the form of brothers and uncles that were willing to pay me for different services, and the merit of those services not necessarily there, but they were willing to throw me a lifeline in that time period. And in that time, we had Thanksgiving come,
How
and
about before we go into that, something that I wanted to share about that moment where you got fired. I don't know if you remember, but you were not truly sure if you wanted to continue on that field. Like you were,
mm,
like God was trying to work in your heart, because when you start on that field, you were not fully a Christian. So now
oh
that
yes,
now that you're a Christian, like you were trying to understand your purpose here,
hmm
and like you were like, I don't think I'm fulfilling my purpose, in this electrical field. Like I want to do so much more that involves interacting with other people.
mm,
And I remember when you said that, we just started praying about it. So we
hmm
started praying about, if God wants you to be on that field or not, or what will be the next step, and then you get fired. So
That's right, because I
so
was complaining about it before. You're
I wouldn't say
right.
complaining,
I
but you
would.
were having your questions about it. So yeah, so when he shared with me that he got fired, I was like, you know what, that was God pretty much answering our prayer, that that was not for you. And but this guy is pretty, is how do you say, he's very hardworking. Like even though he got fired, he has bills and he had zero income. He never asked me for money. So he never asked me for money. And from the day one, he started just to work really, really hard. And I don't know, how many people did you call? Like 100
Oh
people.
man, yeah.
Sending
Sheesh.
resume, like he was
Yeah.
just like on fire. And that told me a lot about him. Like if he wasn't like somebody like, oh, I need help with this, because I was getting my big chunk of money at that time, but he never once asked me for money. And I want him to have like that space as well. Like I wanted to support him in what he needed. So yeah, so I saw him how he went from having nothing to pretty much, partnering with his brother, with his uncle, just going into these different interviews, and pretty much, and I'm convinced that that was also God. Like even though he didn't have a stable job for a month, his bills were always paid, always paid. He never got behind in any of his payments. So I do think that that was definitely God there.
100%. Like the fact that I would have family members willing to really just like aid me when I was broken. It meant a lot. And Shally's willingness to just like be there in that time. I mean, man, that was something that I 100% was not expecting, with everything that I had learned about relationships and my responsibility as a man. And so it's something that to this day is just like, wow, I can't believe that ended up the way it did. And so as we continue in there, me making money on doing whatever the thing is, we come to like our first holidays together, Thanksgiving. She meets the grandma, siblings, brothers, and then Christmas time comes and she goes back to Puerto Rico, spend some time with her family there.
How about before what that we had the wedding?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. So Shally's cousin got married, and of course, Shally comes. She gets a plus one. Of course, I'm the plus one. And so we go up there, and it's awesome. I meet her family for the first.
Everybody.
Yeah.
He got the chance to meet, and that was the first time he was traveling to Puerto Rico. So that was
Yeah.
also the first time he met my parents.
Well, first time I was traveling to Puerto Rico with you for your family.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
To meet my family. So he met everybody, like my parents, my siblings, my aunts,
Yeah.
everybody that traveled from Dominican Republic, from the US. He met everybody. That was a big wedding.
And you guys, the stories that I tell here on the podcast, I tell these stories consistently to everyone. So when they asked how Shally and I met, I explained it to them exactly as I explained it here on the podcast. But something amazing that happened from that wedding, in addition to meeting all the family and having in-depth conversations with her father, which unbeknownst to Shally at that time, I had full intentions of asking her father for his blessing in marrying his daughter. But something amazing that happened was during the part where the bride throws the bouquet, it gets thrown. And wouldn't you know who catches the bouquet?
I don't know how it happened. It just fell in my hand. I was like, what? I mean, I didn't have to, but it still fell in my hand. So
Yeah. And Shally was wearing a dress that night, and I saw her, doing her thing, but also doggone just when she walked out from that crowd holding it, just sauntering as happy as she could be, I was like, wow. God, could you have this be any more obvious, my man? Hey, when the Lord tells you go, he tells you go hard, man.
yeah.
So that was something that was really, really exciting. And then we move into like the Christmas time, and that was, Shally knew that she was going to be traveling to Puerto Rico in that time. And so there were some activities that we did together. For example, the Lou Gardens had like a Christmas event that was going on. And so we did that together, which was almost magical in a lot of ways. I really enjoyed that night that we had together. They had like a slow-mo pig, they had slides and lights like crazy, and we just enjoyed the heck out of it. And then there was also an activity that Shally did where we like made decorations together, and I enjoyed doing that a lot as well. There was a part of me that was like so upset, like, man, our first Christmas together and we're not spending it like physically together, which was a little bit of an issue for me, but I understood it. But I don't think I wasn't any type of graceful about it at a certain point. There was a certain time that I had like expected Shally to call and I didn't get the call. And so when we talked, man, was there an issue in that? But I don't remember any of the details of it at this point. But I know that I was just upset by it, and you were like left feeling sad about it. And yeah, you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I think it was something in regards of New Year's, but I can't remember.
I think you're right. I think I was like expecting to be like on the phone with you or to receive a call very shortly afterwards. And I'm like, what the heck? Why wouldn't you like answer my phone calls when I'm supposed to be we didn't even spend Christmas Day together. Um, and so that's already one thing, but now you're not, even with me during the new year. And yeah, it was just a lot of me being very particular on some things, but
Yeah,
you took it like a champ.
but I remember that in Puerto Rico is sometimes I don't know even how to the statistics, but in New Year's they do a lot of shootings. That's how you
Hmm.
say. So he didn't know that we were actually on the floor trying to avoid getting shot because in New Year's they just start shooting, so we just have to go to the floor and just hope for the best. So yeah, but even though we didn't get this chance to spend Christmas, like the day of Christmas together, I think that I was traveling in Christmas Eve. We still were able to do like our little Christmas before I
Hmm.
went. Like we both did like handwritten letters, and
Right.
we decorate our letters, and then we did our gift exchange. So
Hmm.
even though we didn't have that time of the day, we still made it a point to celebrate, at least a little bit of it before I left. So that was
Yeah,
nice
for sure, for
because he
sure.
needed shoes. He was wearing a shoe that it was like it had a hole in it. It was
Yeah.
driving me insane, that
Oh
poor guy. So I
man.
got him some shoes.
Yeah, man. So from there, let's see here. So I guess before we get into stuff related to the actual proposal, I mean, probably the topic that comes up is knowing when Shally was the one. So for me, I knew that Shally was a woman I wanted to put a ring on pretty much. Oh, wow. That thunder is crazy right now. Pretty much after we finished our month two. From month two, I knew it. The 101 questions were just pretty much giving me confirmation of it. There were times that I did doubt it when we would get into some of the issues that we did, because I questioned like her ability to submit, my ability to lead, the way that our understandings of it matched with each other. But through just always praying about it, like looking at both of the positives as well as some of the negatives and actually measuring them on a just scale and really seeing like of these things what is good enough to keep working for versus what is not. And after weighing it all out, I just time and time again I find myself saying, man, you can always think about a girl that would be better and wouldn't have issues in XYZ departments, but you don't know the baggage that they have in all these places. And what you have right now is someone that is fearfully and wonderfully afraid of the Lord and believes in him and follows him, and she has a love and a fear of God. And that was always the biggest thing that I looked at. And then the adherence to those ideas. And a lot of even our issues came from the ways in which that we understood what it meant to do certain things like lead, submit, communication, what was disrespectful, what was not. And so at the very least, I could at least have conversations with her in those realms, and she was able to understand it. So I also had to measure, just because you could get another girl, could you get another girl who has this foundation that is as strong as it is here? Because at the end of the days, when we really look at it, as beautiful as Shally is, at a certain point, she will lose all of this amazing 19-year-old presenting beauty that she has, even at the age of 31 somehow. Don't ask me, folks. I look like I'm 35 right now. So when it's all said and done, does she have a character that I can hang with? And after doing the math, doing the calculus, looking at what sanctification calls for from her, from me, I decided, you know what? Yes. And as I mentioned, I was seeking to get her father's blessing by the time that we went to Puerto Rico for the wedding. And it was shortly after our return from Puerto Rico, that I actually got on the phone with not only her father but her mother as well, and I requested their blessing. And they were pretty much like, hey, we trust her to make her choice, so you got to ask her, don't ask us. And I'm like, bet. And so yeah, that's what I pretty much have to say about me knowing that you were the one. How about you? You got any?
So it was hard because again, this is a big decision. Pretty much we know that we're date to marry and then we marry for life. Like there wasn't like we're gonna get a divorce if things don't work out. Like I truly want to make sure that I had the person that God want for me. And in my case, I had an experience with God early on where he pretty much spoke to me about my husband. So I wanted to make sure that it matched up with what God told me before about my husband.
Yeah, this right here is crazy, y'all. Are you gonna get into the story of what it was?
Oh, I don't think we don't have a lot of time.
Okay, fair.
But if you want me to, like it was very I can't remember how old I was. And I think I still was dating my ex at that time. And I was going back and forth with the Lord about, if I should keep dating him or not, would he get sanctified through me or not? And because again, he was not a believer. So I was just like praying about that. And that same night that I was praying, I used to dance at my church. So we had like a dance congress in another church. And this person at the end of the event that you could pretty much feel the presence of the Holy Spirit, and there were just like people just like dancing in the spirit and just like this beautiful worship moment. And then this random girl, which was also a dancer, she comes to me and she starts speaking in tongues. And when she speaks in tongues, she also translates what she's saying, and she's pretty much talking in the way like, I am the Lord, I'm speaking to you about this. And it was so crazy because literally I was having like a very difficult prayer. I think it was that same night or the night before, and I got my prayer audibly answered through this person that was speaking in tongues and translating what they were saying. And that's where she's pretty much started talking. The Lord started talking through her to me, and he was saying like, like I've selected the husband I have for you, and you're gonna have a ministry with your husband, and you're gonna have like these qualities. And he pretty much he started giving this message from the Lord. So I knew at that time that that person was not my ex. So it was pretty much God answering my prayer in that sense, but also giving me hope, like, yeah, this is not the one, but I have someone else better for you. So I wanted to make sure that I was not pretty much settling for something that was not the best that God had for me. So, well, dating Devonta, I was like, okay, is this the person that God had for me? Because I don't want to rush anything. I know that this is my first redating experience, like after being like years. And it's okay if I don't get this right the first time. Maybe he's not the one, but what if he is? So for me, it was like a lot of prayer and to make sure that I was pretty much walking in God's purpose for me. And I even started watching like different YouTube videos about these different women that was, oh, I knew my husband was the one. And I received all this confirmation, all this sign. I was like, God, give me a sign. Why am I not seeing these things like all these other women? Like I haven't heard you say Devonta is the one or something like that. I haven't had like those physical confirmation like all these other people. But I was just like praying. And as Devante was saying, like just the characteristics was there. Like he was somebody that pretty much had everything that I've asked for and a little bit more. The communication was there, the maturity was there. Like we were both in the same mindset. So I think that one of the things that made me think, oh yeah, like he is the one, is when it happened, the thing with the shirt. Like we were both aligned. And yeah, and then it would be just like trusting God. Like I think that if you have your focus putting God at the center, and that's something that we have been doing, honoring him, praying every single night. I was like, you know what? I think this is something that I can see myself, long term doing, and he's somebody that I see myself long term with. So yeah, and leap of faith.
Yeah. It's and it's always interesting looking at the ways that prophecy can meet reality. And then when you do see other people getting, I've had interviews with a particular woman on this show who said that when she saw her husband, he had like all the physical traits that she wanted, up to 613 in number. which is wild, insane. And there was not that for Shally, but there was more of this like kind of very measured, like very careful, a lot of pain and growth to be able to get there process for us that I think just, I think for me, I had that she is the person that I should be with. And then for her, I think very wisely and correctly, there was always this like caution and measurement of it, especially being that I was a fairly new Christian in the grand scheme of it, even as much as on fire as I was. In the grand scheme of it, I was a Christian for a total of 8 months, 9 months by the time that we met each other. So yeah, man, that it took a chance on that one. But when we get into, so this is going to be a small little portion before we get into like actually how the proposal part came up to, and that is some of the struggles that I had that were difficult for her, for Shally to be able to understand and to be able to process through. And for me, having come from a secular life, some of the things that I brought into the relationship, in addition to both of us bringing in contact with our exes still, I also had a past where my sexuality was more just I had indulged in it, and some of the expectations of what I had experienced were things that I brought into this relationship, and these were causes for concern because I had that piece there versus a girlfriend who is now my wife, and the differences of how we both imagined what that realm would look like. And so there was some tensions involving that where pretty much I had to make a choice where if I'm going to have this thing turn out a certain way, like I must have these things met. And if not, then like I just can't. And there have been moments where I have, looked at that and said, man, that this right here, if there's anything, and I, especially looking at hindsight, I can look at it and say, man, if there's one thing that has kept man from receiving the blessings of God, it has been um, anything related to sex, sexual desire, anything of that nature. And so I had to very carefully like look at, you know, because at one point there is such a thing as you need to be a certain amount of physically attracted to your partner. You need to be a certain amount of sexually satisfied. Otherwise, despite your diligence, you will allow yourself to fall to temptations. And so, getting into a serious relationship, that was something that I said, I need my attraction levels met to a certain point, and I need my sexual satisfaction levels met to a certain point. And I had a fear that the satisfaction part would not be capable of, but it's definitely something that as you get into the space of marriage and the space of being with your partner, and each of you being able to just communicate on what is and isn't working for you, it's something that you know it becomes the thing that you're looking for, more than when you're just spending your time worrying about it and making it like the top priority. Did you have anything you wanted to add on to that piece at all?
No, I just appreciate, you respecting my stand of, no sex before marriage. So I think that that's something that we both agree on. And in my case, I didn't have temptations like strong temptation from that end because I have kept myself until marriage. So I know that you were struggling with those ideas. So I appreciate your commitment.
There were certainly some areas where we may have exposed ourselves to more temptation than necessary, as far as me maybe staying a night over and just being like in that scenario. I would probably not encourage others to do it. It is risky. I think me being at a certain place where I was 27 living with my mom, I'm just like, man, where can I go so that I don't come back to a place where I'm just like, it was definitely a thing of, this is a place where I feel comfortable, I feel respected, and so I want to be over here with you rather than going to a place where I, in some ways, in a lot of ways, felt like a failure, especially when the lack of the job thing came into play. Um, and I think that the space with you was a comfort for me that I sought so much more so. But it was definitely a reoccurring thing on my part that I think that you handled with a lot of grace and dignity, in as best way that you could. So now we come to portions that involve the actual proposal. So basically, before I did the proposal, Shally and I both agreed that, and this was also still on the tail end of the 101 questions. We were coming to like the last 20. And so, as we neared the tail end of that, we decided that, because there was another couple friend of ours who had done premarital counseling. And with the premarital counseling, I thought, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. And so I decided, hey, Shally, we should do this thing right here. And so we met with a pastor, and through meeting with that pastor, we discovered that there were some areas that we had had miscommunication on. One of the big areas for us was me being in that place where I was still kind of doing freelance work. I didn't have steady income. And even more than that, at this point, as Shally mentioned previously, I had been contemplating where to use my talents and my spiritual gifts at that God had given me. And I had an opportunity to work with a marketing company. However, I didn't think that that marketing company would let me fully lean into God's plan. And so I took a leap of faith, going and doing something with the support of my uncle and with Shally. And so the miscommunication was pretty much, as a man, you are biblically told that you should be the protector provider. And Shally was nearing her residency, so she would be making a certain income that would be good. And we had an understanding that, hey, you, I have the option where I can take a job with this company, and that would mean me traveling a lot, being out. I'd be making decent money, but I would be gone a lot, at least 1 week every month. And Shally would have rathered me be around physically than to be gone. And so we came to the agreement that, hey, um, I will support things while you are getting this thing off of the ground. And so at a certain point in counseling, there was a miscommunication in between us and the pastor. And that was something that Shally and I had to work through. But eventually we landed on, hey, we're at a good place with this. This is what we've agreed upon, Pastor. And the pastor did tell us, okay, if you guys are at a place where you're good with this, you understand your biblical roles, like you guys have a game plan. That was the biggest thing, is don't let that be just like your entire life from here on forward. If this is like part of a game plan, then you can, this is okay to move forward in. But I would hate for you guys to just fall into a place where, you're just doing this because it's convenient rather than it's a part of some intentional plan going forward. Did you have any pieces you wanted to contribute to that, show?
Yeah, so first, I do want to encourage people to do premarital counseling. In our case, Devante suggested to do it even before we got engaged. which I think the pastor might have seen us like we're like, you guys are not even engaged, but
Oh yeah.
he still entertained us. So
He was like
so the way we did it in his church and the way they do it, we answer like 200 questions about everything questions about our life, our childhood, our future, and then they would give us like the results in graphics where our weakness and our strength for us to work, all the way up until marrying each other. So one of the topics that the pastor brought was that about the finances, and that's something that we spoke about before as well, just because we truly want to make sure that we honor our biblical roles. And I know that the expectation is for the man to be the provider. And in our case, we know that it was going to be a little bit flip, at least for a little time. And he was just trying to juggle, those opinions that, from people that care. Like I know that he was saying his concern from good intentions. Like he wants to make sure that set us both, for success. And I also had a conversation with one of my leaders from my church that she also verbalized the same thing. Like, oh, like before getting married, like he has to make sure that he has his life, together in regards of his finances, that he's doing enough to support both of you. And and again, it comes from good intentions, but I think that everything is just in a case by case scenario. That I think that the most important thing is what God is telling you to do. Everything else, yeah, it might be ideal, it might be not, but if God is providing us a way to have what we need covered until something else happened, then we'll do that, as long as we respect each other. And we did like certain things to make sure that Devante feels respected in that time, like me being the main provider during this time. I never, wanted him to feel like he needed to ask me for money. So something that we agree from day one is like we're gonna have like joint bank accounts. That way, it removes some of that tension of pressure. It's like, everything that comes in is gonna come to the same bucket. And then this is our money. It's not my money, it's not your money, it's our money. And I think that that released some of that tension because we are one. What is his is mine, what is mine is his. So
yeah, and so kind of returning very quickly to a previous topic that we were talking about in terms of power dynamics and in terms of roles and things like that, like that was another thing that I think was some of the challenges we navigated was now like, man, so you're the financial provider, you have this position that requires you to step into this leadership role, which can conflict with how we are sometimes, just in our interpersonal dynamics. And so, between the concerns of these people that we had spiritually in our lives, and then these dynamics of like, what families think, what society thinks, like that was something that for a period of time was a major source of just like concern for us. And I think it was, as you said, little by little, just doing certain things to set it up to where it's like, okay, this is what our situation is. And everything that we're doing here involving this podcast, this is an investment that each of us has the full expectation to return dividends to us, trusting God in that process, and trusting just the community of Christians that this might reach out to, and trusting the people out there who desire to have some type of life where they are guided by something bigger than themselves, that where they want a life where they can build a family in a loving manner and in a way that services their true intentions and their true desires, not the desires that just people have, but the desires that our innate man has to want a family, to want something that each person can call their own unit that they care for and provide for. And so, I'm grateful that we have, you know, incredibly niche as our situation is, I don't think our situation is replicatable to a mass amount of people by any stretch of the imagination. I think you have a very good character that makes this even attemptable. and I have a certain character to be able to like have humility enough to even, turn down positions that could pay me enough to take care of things and to say, you know what? Um, God has called you into a position of healing. And for me to put my position of what would be marketing ahead of your position of healing would be perhaps equally or slightly less lucrative than your position, but it would ultimately be a bit more selfish in terms of spiritual impact to the people. Because the thing about Shally's job and her capacity that she serves, I don't care about the position she's in, I don't care about the money she makes. The reason why I was okay with stepping back and having allowing Shally to be that financial lead in this case is because her position does involve healing with people. As we mentioned, she won awards in compassion and art of medicine practice. And for me to say, hey, I know you're exceptional. She's praying with her patients on a very regular basis. For me to say, you should put that down and the 12 years that you just kind of sacrificed of your life, put it all down so that I can, travel to Turkey and Greece and all these different places, be away from you 1 week a month. Um, it just didn't make sense. I couldn't weigh the scales on that and make it make sense enough. And so once we figured that out, that was probably our biggest hiccup that we came to in terms of talking with the pastor. And once we got past that, I would say pretty much everything else was fairly smooth. I think there were some things in conflict resolution that we still had to work on and get better at. But I mean, even to this day, we're constantly working on that because both of us are very, as a Puerto Rican, she has a fiery personality. And then with me, Shally had mentioned the differences of our cultures before. So for me, the respect thing as a Black person and as an Asian person, especially Asian, there's a lot of respect that is supposed to be seen in that realm. And then as a Black person, there is a lot of acknowledging each other's titles as we are, whereas the Asian part is more customs respects wise. And so conflict resolution is something that we still work on, tempering our cultural backgrounds and understanding each other's sort of different cadences and allowing ourselves to really and truly create a culture where it isn't based off of what we learn culturally or heritage wise, but it's something that is the culture that God facilitates and that God encourages us to have. And so once we completed all of our counseling with the pastor, I mean, from that point, he gave us the paper that we needed. We got the certificate, and I think I went and like we had it, and you have a certain amount of time to. No, no, no. I'm sorry. That from the time of us completing it, because you have 30 days to file for a thing. So I then decided it was a random Sunday. And I said, she will never suspect me to propose. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I thought we were gonna have enough time to cover the whole story, but look at the time.
What time is it now?
It's almost 2 hours.
Oh wow. We're like really at the tail end of it because it's literally just the final piece of it explaining how it happened, and then that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We're wrapping up. We're wrapping up. Um, did you have another piece you wanted to add to that? No? Okay. So we did that. It was a random Sunday. I decided I'm gonna propose to her, and it was literally last minute, so she didn't suspect anything. I had the ring in hand and I invited her to the Icon, which is a Ferris wheel in downtown. No, no, I'm sorry, in International Drive of Orlando. And we went up. We were both dressed up very nice. I was wearing a suit. She was wearing was it a dress that night?
Mhm.
Yes. And we took a picture underneath before we went on. And then we went up. There was music playing. We were dancing around, and I hit a little spin number where I did a spin. I landed on one knee, and I held up the box and I said, "Shally, will you marry me?" Do you remember your thoughts at that moment?
Yeah. As he was saying, I did not expect it at all. So when he asked me, and he said another thing as well, saying like, like how I was the person that you wanted to spend the rest of your life and all of those things. So yeah, I was very excited and I was happy and I said yes.
She said yes. And yeah, so we kissed, enjoyed it.
And his heart was beating so fast.
Oh
As
yeah.
I still remember, I put my hand on your chest and your heart was beating so fast. That was cute.
So we come down, we got some pictures of it, and then from there we put up a little post on social media. Family found out, and we got to the certificate from the pastor, and we handled all of that stuff, planned out our wedding, which was set for, at first it was going to be like just a small little gathering, like literally just enough witnesses to make it legal. And then little by little, more people were desiring to be a part of it, mainly family. And so it just got from two people, four people to about 15-ish people.
Like 25, 23, 25.
23, 25. That many people? Oh
Yeah.
wow. But so we got it planned out, and what was amazing was that my father, he heard that we were making plans, and he took the burden of the catering and the food, and he handled the whole thing. Not only did he handle the food and the catering, he even got an Airbnb that my wife and I were able to use to host a reception that we also used as our first night being married together. And it was just, I was not expecting him to do as much as he did. I was amazed by it. So a major shout out to Pops on that one. And also my mother on the back end for our honeymoon, she had reached out to different people that she knew, friends and family, and said, "Hey, if you can support Devontae and his newlywed wife in going on to a honeymoon, we would appreciate it greatly." And so we were just receiving hundreds of dollars from friends and family, and we were able to use that money to go out and enjoy an amazing honeymoon. It was a staycation in a hotel that was local, and it just had pool and activities, and it was just a great time. Shally, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I do feel like God was the one that planned our wedding. Like sometimes we just want to settle for something, like as he was saying, we're just gonna do the legal wedding in the, what is it, like a courthouse, or
Yeah.
and just have, I think they ask or two or four witnesses, because something that I said to Devante is that once we are engaged, like we are pretty much bound to get married. Like I did not want to have a long engagement. I didn't want to be waiting 1 year to get married just to plan a party. So that was my mindset. Like once we knew that we were gonna get married, I was just ready to get it done. So when he proposed, I think it was in the end of March, was it?
Yes, it was like end of March, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh yeah, we could get married on like April Fool's Day," but then people wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, so he wanted to marry like the next few weeks, and
Literally, like the next week.
but in because of my job, like I was working in the hospital at that time, and the time didn't work for me because I couldn't get like days off like after the waiting.
Hmm.
So the date that I had already time off was in May. So we had a very short engagement. He proposed on the end of March, and we already were married by May 6th. And in that little time frame, as I mentioned, it was pretty much God orchestrating everything, because obviously He wants good things for His children. And in all of our relationship, we just wanted to honor Him. And initially, as we were saying, we were going to do something very simple, but He had other things in mind, like our family. They wanted to be present, like my parents, they wanted to travel from Puerto Rico to be present in this day. And then I had my sister that also came, Devante's family. So at the end, we had like this, like 23 to 25 people, and more people wanted to come. It's just that the chapel in our church is small, and it only fit like 25 people in it. So that was like our limit. But pretty much, initially I was just gonna buy like a random white dress that just looked nice, but then I was like, man, I have to now step up to the occasion, and we're gonna have this very nice chapel. We're gonna have all these family members. I want to look nice for this special day. And what I did is that I went online to this page that one of my friends gave me, and I started seeing these like wedding dresses. And I just looked at one. I was like, I really love this one, and I ordered. And keep in mind that this was like 1 week before the wedding. So because again, I was just gonna buy like a random white dress, and I was like, okay, so let me just try this. The wedding dress only had two comments. One of the comments said the size is smaller than it appeared, and then the other comment says the size is larger than it appeared. And I was like, okay, so I'm just gonna go with my usual size, and I like expedite the delivery so that way it would come in play. And that was my only plan. I was like, if this doesn't fit, then I'll just go to my normal white dress that I could just get anywhere. And but when it arrived on time, and it was just perfect. It was just perfect. It fit perfectly. So that's why I think that God was just like orchestrating everything about the chapel in the church, about the dress. I think I had who I think somebody from my family, they also sent me like some like the earrings, the bracelets. And so everybody was just like supporting us in this way. And then, Devante's like stepmother, she was helping out with the bouquet and the cake that they also took care of that. So like everybody just like literally was coming together in a very short notice. But keep in mind that they knew like maybe a month the
Yeah,
most before
max.
the date. So I'm just in awe of like the love and support that we receive, and the wedding was beautiful. Even the photographer that
Yeah. Our
he
photographer,
came
which
through, and
normally thousands of dollars for a wedding photographer, he did it for hundreds of dollars, and
yeah.
it was a steal, absolute steal.
Yeah, so I had a beautiful dress. We had a photographer. We had our family. So yeah, it was a very beautiful day.
Yeah, you guys. And man, it's been a long journey to get to this, but this is the whole story of us going from dating on a dating app to real life to engaged and then to married. So, you guys, if you're someone that thinks this dating app stuff cannot work, here's the thing. If you're getting on it and you're just being frivolous, then you're right, it won't work. If you're just getting on for casual fun, it's not going to work. If you're just getting on for uh, um, trying to make something happen with the most attractive person, it's not going to work. You have to be intentional. You have to set parameters and standards, boundaries, you filters. Shally, even being a woman, women get more love on dating apps, and Shally had dozens of options. However,
Hundreds.
hundreds of options. And even through all those options, she was about ready to give up. But Shally actually spent money on the dating app in order to have decent filters and exposure to the people who responded with those filters in mind. And I was someone that was just on them leisurely, but I was intentional about the type of women I wanted. And that's what it takes if you're going to get on an app. You're not going to get on an app and find a suitable partner just by going by the attractiveness levels and common interest. It's going to have to be your profile is a full case of who you are. Especially as a man, your profile needs to be a full case of who you are, to where if somebody were to put a filter on and search for you, you would be one of the top options for that filter set. And so I just want to thank you guys for joining in this 3-part series. If you joined on it all, man, leave any type of feedback. We would love to see it. If you're discouraged, and just know we're not the only couple that we know that met through a dating app. I can name off the top of my head at least 4 or 5 more couples that met through dating apps and got married through them. So it's very much a real and active thing. But I do want to let you guys be off for this Sunday. I want to have another big round celebrating the fact that we have made it to the conclusion of 30 days of streaming, no days off. And guess what? I will not be doing this for a long time to come. This has been one of the most enlightening work experiences I've ever had. I've produced some of my favorite content in this time period: follow-up interviews, group panels, topical discussions, teacher, student, husband, wife, father, daughter, coworker, me and you doing stuff. Like, this month has had so many awesome pieces of content that I've had such a great excuse to get all of these amazing people on the show to talk about these specific topics. And so I thank God for every single person who was willing to help me facilitate this. I thank God for the fact that even with all of the numerous cancellations that we had, it pushed me to learn how to use different tools to be able to have these shows. I thank God that I've had the growth in the equipment, and now you guys can start to get next show. We're going to have multiple angles going on. We got a new camera in. We got a video switcher in. We'll be on a new platform for streaming. I just got my refund from StreamYard, about to try out Streamlabs. And so, like, man, I am going to take tomorrow. There is no stream. Tomorrow is going to be a day of recollecting, getting all of the new equipment set up, learning features, celebrating a friend who's going to be getting coronated as a pastor, and just reflecting on this entire experience in total. So thank you guys again. Thank you, all of my guests. Thank you, my lovely wife. And most importantly, glory to God for the past 30 days and for the rest of our lives. Let's go ahead and close this thing out in prayer, honey. Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, we thank you, God, for this time. Thank you for giving us all the tools needed and the motivation and just the single-mindedness on you to be able to facilitate 30 days in a row of being able to make content and put it out to the world, God. Lord, we don't care about the number of eyes. We don't care about the number of views. What we care about is that we set a goal. We wanted it to honor you, and we kept to that word. And because of that, we were able to bring on so many guests that were able to sing your praise and join us. We thank you for every person that was able to be prayed over in that 30 days, the new connections that were made, the opportunities at networking. We thank you for Shally's patience as she had many nights going to sleep by herself, me coming in at 12 in the morning, 2 in the morning, joining her when she's already asleep. And we just pray, Lord, that we can now take the rest of this day and the next day to just rest in your awesomeness and to just be able to recollect and appreciate your goodness, Lord. We thank you, God, for blessing us, for blessing the audience, for blessing each guest. And we just pray that we would all continue to walk into your paths, Lord. All these things we give you, all this excitement, celebration, and acknowledgement In Jesus' awesome name, we pray. Amen. You guys, thank y'all so much for watching. I have been your host, Devontae Colonel. I will not see you tomorrow, but I will see you on the next episode of the Inspired Challenge podcast. Take care and good night.